Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Devesh Pandit and I am with E4 Security Consulting. And today I am going to talk to you about internal audit. You are attending this webinar because you have asked many questions on uh, conducting internal audit, what are the importance of internal audit, when you should conduct, what should be the frequency of it, the issues arising during the internal audit, etc. So I have tried to combine all your questions and try to come up with one webinar so that I can answer all the questions, most of the questions with one webinar. So let's get going. So you need at least one internal audit conducted before a certification audit, that is for sure. So you have to have an internal audit practice in place so that you can you can you can find out what are uh, the vulnerabilities of your management system, and you can fix those before a certification auditor comes in and gives you a finding. So this is a low cost approach before the certification audit. So it could be, you might be waiting for a surveillance audit or you might be going for a certification audit, but this is a low cost effort to find out findings before you go into a certification or a surveillance audit. So, and this is a requirement. For example, if you are doing an ISO audit, that's a requirement. And in some of the other requirements also, it is a requirement. So, if you are implementing an internal audit, let's take that one first. And these are the different kind of situation and issues that arise uh, during the implementation, that you come up with a situation where you have conflict of interpretation of a standard. You are reading a requirement or you are reading a standard, and you are interpreting a standard or requirement in one way, and your colleague is reading um, in one particular way. That could be happening because of no prior experience or no training. In that case, do the best. Take a training, get some experience, sit with a person who has more experience, go to the industry seminars and interact with people, those who have more experience, and ask questions basically and interpret the standard. Most of the standards are very user friendly and try to it is based on the common sense. So if you do the way, if if you follow the requirements of the standard or the requirement the way it is written, and you should not have any problem. So interpreting the standard is like you don't have to uh, boil the ocean and uh, interpret it like a lawyer, and what if this happens, what if that happens. No, stick to the requirement, what they are asking for. And basically, if I put it in terms of what is the zest of the requirement, what they are asking for, what would be the outcome of it, what they are after. So if you can find out that, if you can figure that one out, then you have identified what is required for that control or the requirement, that standard or requirement is looking. So that way your interpretation would come in that 80-20 rule, and chances are that you may not get a finding. So, and once again, you are doing an internal, you are implementing an internal audit. So if your internal auditor comes and gives you a finding, you can argue with him, and you can debate and you can learn from that exercise. So basically, this is this is an exercise that you want to have. And sometimes auditors also have their training, their experience, and you want to learn from their experience. And sometimes one auditor has experience in one area and the other auditor has experience in other area. So it depends, it depends on the auditor's experience also. So if you ask a question to one auditor, that may differ from the other auditor. So you are basically you are combating this implementation part of your internal audit. So this thing is going to happen and you have to deal with it. Developing, maintaining management system and documentation. Well, questions are on redundant efforts, the silo mentality. Yes, that can happen. Human ego can come in place. My way or highway, that is also possible. One department might be doing something differently and they want to develop their policy and their procedures that way. But you are doing it for the organization. You have to come and sit down together and you have to remove that silo mentality. You have to let go your ego and you have to develop and write your policy procedures and working documents so that you can work for a common goal and you have to develop the policy procedures, working documents, logs, audit trails, etc. So instead of creating a redundant and counterproductive documentation, work towards a productive and effective creating management system and proper documentation that will help you a lot. Lack of efforts and lack of management oversight, lack of management support, lack of knowledge of the auditor conducting the internal audit. That can also happen. No efforts, no knowledge, or simply ignorance of the person who is implementing the management system. That can also happen. So first thing you want to get on board the management when you are implementing, and we will cover this in next slide. So management support is crucial. You want to tell them the benefits of internal audit and why you want to do that. Lack of knowledge of the auditor conducting the internal audit. So select your auditor appropriately. I mean, have somebody who has a knowledge of the subject matter. So select a subject matter expert, so to speak, in that area. Or if you don't have a subject matter expert, then you may appoint somebody who has a subject matter. Let's say somebody is good at auditing, okay, but does not have a firewall skills. So you might want to have him tag along with somebody who knows firewall. The auditor can consult with the subject matter expert and create the questionnaire or formulate the questions which is which makes sense to the auditee or the department which is being audited. So these things are possible. And lack of knowledge of the auditor conducting the internal audit, that is also possible. But these are the things that you have to combat with, that you have to identify before you engage into the audit. No efforts, no knowledge, simply the ignorance and lack of knowledge of the implementer. That could be a big problem. So, for example, you are supposed to create a log, or you are supposed to create a checklist, or you are supposed to create a process, a quality process, for example, and the person does not know how to measure the input control and the output control, and the quality measure. then that could be a problem. So that could be a training issue. So that you have to consider before you start your internal audit program. And a lack of discipline. Some people jump into this internal audit program as a gung-ho approach. Okay, they say, "Oh, let's go and do internal audit," and they fail miserably because they have no planning. Okay, so plan your internal audit, plan, do, check, act, and there are a lot of videos available on YouTube. You can look at those, and probably I will make some videos on that too. But make a proper planning of your internal audit the way you want to carry out for your organization. Okay, so if you do a gung ho approach and if you have no planning and then you do not do proper action plan, and then if you do not do the checking, proper checking, and then you do not do the if you do not do the remediation part, then your internal audit is going to fail miserably. Okay, so lack of discipline for the internal audit is also going to fail. So basically, my point here is, yeah, these are all valid and genuine questions for internal audit, and keep asking this question so that I can answer. Okay, so what is an internal audit? So basically, it's a do-it-yourself project. Okay, so why don't you do it yourself? Why you want to invite somebody to do an internal audit? Why you want to spend money when you can do it yourself? No need to hire a third party auditor when you can find your own shortcomings. Okay, ask for a proof that is implemented and why that control is working or why it is not working. Okay, so instead of asking third party to come on your site and have that person tell you that, hey, this is not working, rather, you would want to do that because you know the culture, you know the organization, you know the infrastructure, and you want to do it yourself because you may learn out of this process. So do it yourself, save some money, and that way you know your own shortcomings, and that way you can make that process better. So 9 to 5, when you do your, any technical process or any firewall process or any access control process or patching process or anything that you are doing, and you see something is broken, that is a finding, and give that finding, and that way you give them a timeline and say you have to fix it within this timeline, and that is a do-it-yourself project. Think of this internal audit as a training tool. All right. So you want to make a homegrown internal auditor, and you have some subject matter expert in your team. So take their help, and this internal audit will compel you to conduct the audit. And once you start getting the hang of it, you will learn how a certification auditor thinks. Okay, so create a smaller scope. Okay, don't boil the ocean. Create a smaller scope. Don't start an internal audit with, hey, I'm going to audit all 12 departments. No, I'm going to audit one department this year, and then I'm going to increase 2 departments and then 3, and etc. Or this year I'm going to audit only my laptops, for example, and then I'm going to increase my Wi-Fi access points, and so on. So, that gives you better return on investment. So you are going to reveal your findings prior to the certification or a compliance audit in a friendly environment where you have a lot of time. You can fix your shortcomings, and you can do it without any conflict. You can say, hey, we have this audit coming up, and see if we can fix this before this thing. So that is where your internal audit can help you. So most requirement anyway requires at least one internal audit conducted prior to the certification anyway. So if you document what you are doing, so this documentation will help you that, hey, we have conducted this internal audit. These are the outcomes. These are the findings. And there is a corrective action and preventive action going on. And this is what we have documented. So you have nothing to lose here, and basically it's a do it yourself project. Think of it as a training program, which brings you return on investment, and it is mostly it is a required item anyway for most standards or most requirements. So do it. So how to part of the internal audit? Okay, how to do it? So how to conduct an internal audit? So get the top management support. All right, you got to have it. Otherwise, you will fall on your face. Create an audit charter. Okay. Create an organization and structure, meaning when you have an internal audit organization that should be reporting to the top management, so that you can avoid a conflict in the organization. The structure, you need some structure in place so that you can capture your audit documentation and you can place it in a secure place. All right. Develop audit cycle strategy. And when I say, audit cycle strategy, meaning you want to conduct audit annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, weekly. So you can define how mature you are. If you have matured from weekly audits to monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annual. So define what you want to do. Okay. So define your scope. Okay. Define your scope, and based on your scope, if you have just begun the internal audit program and you are just learning, then on a smaller scale you are doing some small weekly audits just to get your feet wet. All right. And then I think when you say, yeah, we got the hang of it, then you can do some monthly audits and say, yes, we definitely got our feet wet, and now we are going to do departmental audits on a quarterly basis. Subject matter experts are assigned, etc. And then you have semi-annual or annual audits. So you define your audit cycle strategy. You define the rules of engagement, etc. by defining your audit objectives, audit criteria, what you are going to audit, what would be the outcome of the audit, the objective of the audit, developing the audit process, who is going to audit, how it is going to be done, what time it will start, the process. Okay, there will be an interview process, the sampling process. So you have to define everything. And then procedures. Okay, who is going to create a audit test plan, how the audit test plan will be submitted, how the audit test plan will be reviewed by the top management, how they are going to react to it, how to audit, and then how to submit the audit report, how to create an audit report, how to deal with the findings, etc., how much time you want to give to fix the finding, etc. So now with all this said, and if you don't have proper training for that standard or for that requirement, and then get the training for the standard or requirement, okay, so that you can interpret that standard or that requirement appropriately, and you don't get into conflict with the other people. So what you have to do, download the standard or the requirement from the respective website, and highlight the keywords like must, shall. So when you see this, Those are the required verbs. Okay, so auditable, those are the auditable things. So when you see must, shall, that means you've got to pay attention and you've got to have documentation, proofs for that. When you say should, those are like guidelines, and those are not auditable, but those are guidelines. So pay attention to that, and those things means it is nice to have, because if you follow the guideline, your auditable items will come out good. Document as a verb, process of documenting. So you document what you are doing here, and document as a noun, a log or an audit trail or a proof or something that you have that you want to document. Okay. Then evidence, a proof verified by internal auditor will also be verified by a certification auditor or a third party auditor for certification. So when you see a word like evidence, that means the internal auditor will look for some evidence that, hey, you must have done this activity. So show me the proof that you have done something. Okay, so that could be, let's say, show me the proof that you had conducted this meeting. So you should be able to show the evidence that you had a calendar invite, and then you have a meeting agenda. I'm just giving an example. And then you should have a meeting minutes, and then some action item that came out of that meeting. So things like that. So that means that meeting took place, and that is a proof. So that's an evidence. So that's what an auditor does. As an internal auditor and certification auditor will do the same thing. Check the responsible person doing the job, meaning firewall administrator, okay, is doing, he's checking the logs and, is documenting things. So check the responsible person is doing his job. So that is what the auditor does. So basically, in internal audit, you want to fix the process and meet the requirement. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate that. Please like, share, and subscribe to my educational channel. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.